Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, Radhika.
Okay. A very,
Yes, Radhika.
okay, so I will start. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. I, Radhika Dhanuka, Managing Committee member of Ahmedabad Vikasa, wholeheartedly welcomes you all to our third session of Swadhyay. Firstly, I would like to welcome CA Fenil Shah Sir, Chairman of Ahmedabad branch, and CA Anjali Chokshi ma'am, who have provided us support and guidance to launch this event. Now, I would like to call Divya to introduce our speaker for today, Umang Dakshini.
Uh, uh, Radhika, just to interrupt, we will play our ICI Moto song. Just a minute, Radhika.
Yes, sir.
Just let me. I'm just arranging for that. Just a minute. Radhika, I am also making you the host. Right?
Yes.
I'm admitting all because by mistake the admit option is kept. I'm making you the host also.
Okay, sir.
Radhika,
Yes, ma'am.
I request you all.
just few seconds. The mentor for the session is joining in 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I've already talked to sir. I've
Yeah.
messaged him.
Yeah.
So let us just wait for 2 minutes then.
Okay, sir.
Anjali, when you need to unmute.
I would request Anjali ma'am to give welcome speech.
Hello, I'm audible?
Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
Okay. A very good evening to the speaker, student speaker of the day, CA Fenil Shah Chairman, and highly motivated the new Vikasa committee and my dear students. Welcome to this third session for this new episode of Swadhyay. I firstly congratulate the speaker for the day, Umang Dakshini, for taking this opportunity. I am sure that with the overwhelming response of the speakers and the participants, Vikasa Ahmedabad is going to rock. My dear students, participation itself is a big thing. Once you participate, I am sure within few sessions you will notice personal and professional development in yourself, and this new committee is doing fantastic job of arranging every day one new thing for you. So I request all the students to take the maximum advantage of it, and our chairman, whose heart is very much with the students, is also equally involved in it. So I personally request all the students to take the maximum advantage of it. If you have any suggestions, any idea, we are definitely there for you. Thank you, and once again, welcome to all.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would request CA Fenil Shah sir to address the meeting.
Thank you, Radhika. CA Atul Shah sir, the mentor for today's session. A very learned and experienced mentor Vikasa got for the session. So Vikasa is privileged to. The speaker for the session, Shri Umang Dakshini ji, the CA final student. Right, I have a tradition that I always address the speaker, right, who is not a CA with a tag of Shri, because it's very, very important, the person, right. CA Anjali Chokshi, the chairperson of Vikasa, Radhika Dhanuka, the chief coordinator for this particular project of Swadhyay, Jay, vice chairman, Divya also present there, Akshat, treasurer present there, and various others. A very good evening to all of you. I'm also very happy that yes, we are continuing with this particular series and getting an overwhelming response. In the sense, here the term overwhelming differs, right? Because if it would have been a webinar, right, then the criteria of overwhelming would have been like then the criteria of overwhelming would have been like when we are getting 200 300 people. But this Swadhyaya is not a webinar, let me just tell, right? So those who are here, right, even though we are 20 people, right, but this is mainly an interactive platform where a student is presenting, a mentor is mentoring that particular mentee student. So this is the way this has to go. So that's how even people more than 10 is a very overwhelming response to this particular thing. What I would request to all this participants who are present here, that this initiative needs to be taken ahead, not by us alone, but it is to be taken ahead by you alone. So what I request is, when you have came here, now whenever you get any kind of announcements with respect to this particular initiative, you kindly promote this. First, you come as a speaker, you bring others along as a viewer, and that's how this particular journey of Swadhyaya will continue, which is going to benefit, as we can see, n number of people to get this platform to speak at Ahmedabad branch of Vikasa. So with these words, again, I thank you all for joining. I again thank Atul sir for accepting this particular invitation. And yes, next 2-3 talks are also planned. So Radhika will just announce about that also. And now before we request Jay to announce with respect to future events, I request you all to keep your hand on your heart to respect our ICI motto song. So we are now playing with the ICI motto song. Just a minute.
सुप्तेषु जागृति य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः दोषः शतः सर्वे तदूनाद्यैकश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
Thank you. Now I would request our Vice Chairman of Ahmedabad branch of Vikasa, Mr. Jai Motwani, to introduce the new upcoming events for our new committee.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Jai, you are audible.
Okay. First of all, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting in this inconvenient place. I was outside actually. So it doesn't matter anyway. So I need to interact with you all, and you are just friends to me, everyone. So I feel comfortable anywhere, like every time with you. So let me just introduce future events for for upcoming months, which Vikasa is going to host or organize, right? So there are many events, and which will be divided into this types of like some events are related to health, right? Some events are related to our personal development. Some events are related to professional development. Some are related to extracurricular activities. So our main aim is to bring up the students to that level that no one can say that CA students are never compatible at any place. Like if we go somewhere in a company, so we should be compatible with each one or every one of the profession. Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, Jai, you are audible.
Yes. So main aim ये है हमारा कि अगर सीए स्टूडेंट कहीं भी जाता है आगे जाके आर्टिकलशिप के लिए या फिर कोई भी कंपनी से डील करता है, कोई भी कॉर्पोरेट वर्ल्ड में जाता है, तो उससे एक बेसिक नॉलेज के अलावा एक एक्स्ट्रा नॉलेज होना चाहिए। जिस एक मेन इसी मेन कॉन्सेप्ट पे एक स्वाध्याय वाला सीरीज बेस्ड है। हम लोग आगे एक ऐसी सीरीज ला रहे हैं जहाँ एक छोटे छोटे टॉपिक को लेके, जैसे एक एग्जांपल दूं तो हाउ टू प्रेजेंट एक टॉपिक होता है। जैसे हम ऑफिस में कुछ भी प्रेजेंटेशन देते हैं तो nobody of us knows perfectly that how to present things, so we'll be bringing up with that concept कि एक मेंटर होगा जहाँ पे वो हमें सिखाएंगे कि एक प्रेजेंटेशन कैसी देनी चाहिए, यहाँ एक प्रोफेशनल अटायर क्या है, कैसे होना चाहिए, यहाँ बेसिक आईटी में आईटी रिलेटेड जो चीजें हैं वो कैसे होनी चाहिए। We are anyway coming up with the health related events. We are also coming with various sports events after exams, obviously. We are also coming with exam related events that will be launched soon, and that will be like you will come to know through that WhatsApp groups and Instagrams. So I request you to follow our Instagram page, and I request you to tell your friends to follow the Instagram page, because विकासा कमेटी हम 6 लोगों की नहीं है। विकासा कमेटी अहमदाबाद में रजिस्टर्ड जितने भी स्टूडेंट्स हैं उन सबका विकासा इज वेस्टर्न इंडियन सीए स्टूडेंट्स एसोसिएशन, राइट। सो वही 25,000 की स्ट्रॉन्ग फैमिली वही विकासा है। तो प्लीज इसको प्रमोट करिए, प्लीज इसको आगे ले आइए, अपनी ही फैमिली है और बस यही एम रखना है कि सब आगे एक साथ बढ़े, एक साथ ग्रो करें। थैंक यू सो मच Radhika, over to you.
Thank you
And
so much.
definitely I would also like to mention our chairman and chairman of Ahmedabad branch and chairman of Vikasa committee, who are wholeheartedly with students. They are really eager and they are really helpful towards students. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much, Radhika.
Thank you, Jay.
Sanjay, ma'am.
Jay, you can see the screen.
Yes, I could see the screen.
Okay, friends. Then this is the workshop which is designed for you, so that in this text audit season you get a very good experience, a practical exposure of how the things to be done, a combination of the text audit provisions, the critical text audit provisions vis-a-vis the application of ICDS. So friends, we will share you soon tomorrow this particular whole plan, but as you are the valued participants of this Swadhyay, you are getting an advanced information. So this is the series. Just you to spread this to max and also take the benefit of the same. Over to Radhika.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request Divya Jain to introduce the mentor for today's session.
Good afternoon, everyone. CA Atul Shah sir is the proprietor of Atul R. Shah and Company, practicing since 35 years, and he was the past secretary of Chartered Accountants Association of Ahmedabad, and his area of interest is income tax and audit.
Thank you so much, Divya. Now I would request you to please introduce the speaker for today's session.
Our speaker for the day is Mr. Umang Dakshini. He is a CA final student appearing in May 2021 for his exams. Keen interest in accounting, finance and taxation have made him pursue CA course. Undergoing articleship under senior most practitioner, CA Atul Shah sir has helped him to sharpen his skills under proper mentorship. Highlighting co-curricular activities, he had secured an All India rank 40 in National Financial Literacy Assessment Test, organized by NISM jointly with RBI and SEBI. He is second rank holder in Brainy Babel virtual quiz organized by Vikasa Ahmedabad branch of ICI. Also, he was a state level participant in Gujarat quiz organized by Government of Gujarat and headed by then CM Shri Narendra Modi. Over to you, Mr. Umang Dakshini.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are
Yes.
audible.
First of all, very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you Team Vikasa for providing me such a wonderful opportunity. And I would also like to thank from bottom of my heart to CA Atul Shah sir for being a mentor for this session. Over to you, Atul sir.
I have gone through your PPT. It is nicely prepared, and but there are some points which require to be deliberated, which we'll discuss it after you present your paper.
Yes. Oh, definitely, sir. So shall we start for the topic?
Yes, Umang.
My screen visible?
Yes, Umang, it's perfectly visible.
Thank you. So friends, today's topic is taxation aspect of charitable and religious trust, including recent amendments. So first of all, we understand the taxation. It is required that we should know about what is the trust. One second. Yes, as per Section 3 of Indian Trust Act 1882, a trust is an obligation annexed to the ownership of property and arising out of a confidence reposed in and accepted by the owner or declared and accepted by him for the benefit of another or another and the owner. So it basically deals with private trust. A trust is a convenient method whereby a limited number of persons may hold a property on behalf of other persons. Once the property has been vested in the trustee, they own the property, but they are compelled by the law to exercise their ownership for the benefit of beneficiary only. So we can say that trustee are the owner, but they are compelled by the law to exercise their ownership only for the benefit of beneficiaries. It means that legal ownership vests in the trustee, but beneficiary have effective ownership. Now, before we start the taxation, it is pertinent to note that what is the background of the taxation of trust. So in 1860, when income tax was firstly introduced in India, income from the property solely employed for the religious or public charitable purpose was exempt from the tax. Since then, we can say that it is enjoying the exemption. Although the income tax was amended from time to time on innumerable occasions, the income derived from the property held for the charitable or religious purpose always enjoyed the exemption. Since the tax concession afforded to this institution involved a sacrifice of public revenue, it became imperative to ensure that tax privileges are not abused and they are enjoyed only by those charitable and religious institutions which deserve them. This is the reason why we have to understand the different provision, and this is the reason for the coming of the provision which restrict abuse of the benefit. With this end in view, the section of the Income Tax Act dealing with this subject, particularly taxation of trust, underwent major changes in several respects, principally in 1939, 52, 61, 66, 70, and so on. Therefore, it is a matter of considerable importance to study the provision of law governing the creation of charitable and religious trust, as also the law specifying the condition and circumstances which and when they are satisfied would entitle to enjoy the exemption from tax. So this is the background, and before we start, it is also required to be noted that what are the public trust and what are the private trust. This distinction is must to be understood. The definition of trust, which we have seen as per Section 3 of Indian Trust Act, is applicable only to the private trust. The distinction between the private and public trust is not specified anywhere in the Act, but it has been brought out by the Supreme Court in the case of Devkinandan versus Muralidhar, which is as under: by public trust must be understood such as constituted for the benefit either of the public at large or some considerable portion of particular description. It is not necessary that it must include public at large. If it is incorporated for some considerable portion of particular description, then also it would be called as private public trust. So to this class belong all trust for charitable purposes, and indeed public trust and charitable trust may be considered in general as a synonymous expressions. And in private trust, the beneficial interest is vested absolutely in one or more individual. It is pertinent to note that in private trust, beneficial interest is vested absolutely in one or more individuals who are or who will be the definitely ascertained. So now let's discuss what are the charitable purpose and religious purpose. Friends, charitable purpose is being defined under section 215 of the Act, and which reads out as under: charitable purpose includes relief of poor. So this definition starts with includes word. So it is an inclusive definition and it is not exhaustive definition. So it includes relief of poor, education, yoga, medical relief, preservation of environment, and preservation of monuments or places or object of artistic or historic interest, and the advancement of any other object of general public utility. Now this last limb is difficult or it is destructive. Religious, and first we have to note that religious purpose is not defined anywhere in the Income Tax Act. Now there is one proviso to this definition under 215. It is provided that any advancement of any other object of general public utility shall not be a charitable purpose if it involves the carrying out of an activity in which are in nature of trade, commerce or business, or any activity of rendering any services in relation to any trade, commerce or business for a cess or fee or any other consideration, irrespective of the nature of use or application or retention of the income, unless such activity is undertaken in the course of actual carrying out of such advancement of any other object of general public utility, and the aggregate receipt from such activity or activities during the previous year relevant to assessment year do not exceed 20% of total receipt of the trust undertaking such activity or activities of that previous year. Now what does it want to say? What is the meaning of this proviso? So here is the analysis. It means if object of the trust are advancement of any other object of general public utility, this is the first condition. And second condition is the trust is carrying out any business activities. Third condition is such business activities are carried out to attain objective of trust. It is the must requirement. And total receipt from such business activity does not exceed 20% of total receipt of trust. Then and only then advancement of any other object of general public utility shall be considered as charitable purpose. So if these four conditions are fulfilled, then only then we can say that advancement of any other object of general public utility is charitable purpose. Now, if in any year above mentioned conditions are not fulfilled, then in that year advancement of any other object of general public utility will not be a charitable purpose, and hence in that particular previous year trust will lose the exemption under section 11 and 12 and will be taxable as unregistered tax. Means there will be a 30% tax will be treated and taxable as an AOP. However, there will be no cancellation of registration under section 38. This has been clarified by CBDT by its circular dated 27th May 2016, number 21/2016. So now it is important to note that these provisos shall be applicable only if the object of the trust are advancement of any other object of general public utility and trust is carrying on business. But if the object of the trust are education or yoga or medical, then these criteria are not required to be fulfilled. Then it will be taxed in accordance with the 11(4), that is the business income in case of trust. With respect to this proviso, there are so many judicial pronouncements which are important, and one is of our own institute, that is ICI versus DGIT, Delhi High Court's judgment that institute cannot regarded as educational institution. An activity would be considered business if it is undertaken with a profit motive, but this is not always to be looked, but in some cases this may not be determinative. When the dominant objective was only to regulate the profession of chartered accountancy and it is a charitable institution, therefore mere receipt of fees for conducting coaching classes as well as placements cannot be a business activity under section 215. There are also various other judgments: DIT versus Sabarmati Ashram Gaushala Trust, DIT versus Ahmedabad Management Association of Gujarat High Court. So we can understand that this is the topic which one must need taken care for the same. Now we are going for the what are the different types of income of a trust. Income of a trust can mainly be bifurcated in two categories. One is voluntary contribution and other is income from the property held under the trust. Voluntary contribution, we generally know this as a donation. Voluntary contribution, there are three parts mainly. One is general donation, that is if we go to some trust or charitable institution and we give donation of 500 rupees, 1000 rupees, then it is generally general donation. And the other category is corpus donation. It is specific donation. Other is anonymous donation, which we are looking after this. And in the case of income from property held under the trust, there will be income like rent income, interest income, and any other income. So what are the general donation and what is the taxation of it? General donation, as we have discussed, it is a donation without any specific guidance or without specific instruction. It is taxable like normal income, and from this donation trust is able to enjoy benefit of 85%. What is the benefit of 85%? We are looking in upcoming slides. The other facet of donation is corpus donation. Corpus donation is the donation with specific instruction of donor. That is, instruction may be specific purpose, that is this donation should be used exclusively for constructing the building of the trust or such other instruction. An instruction may also be with regard to that only the donation amount should be used, or this donation amount should be kept as FD and interest income arising from that should be used. So this is a corpus donation which is based on instruction of donor, and this donation is clearly exempted from tax under section 11(1)(d) of the Act. So corpus donation will not be treated as an income because it is straight away exempted under 11(1)(d). There are some important points which are required to be noted for the purpose of corpus donation. Corpus donation, first, as we have seen, it is exempt, but it will not be exempt if trust is not registered under section 12A, 12AA, 12AB as the case may be. Then it will be treated as income as per definition of 224, because 224 says that income includes voluntary contribution, and corpus donation is also a part of voluntary contribution. So if the trust is not registered, it will not be able to enjoy the exemption under section 11 and 12. So in that case, it will be taxable and treated as income. Now, if one trust give donation to any other trust from the corpus donation, or sorry, one trust give donation to other trust as a corpus donation, then also it not be considered as an application of income. it is the amended Wide Finance Act 2018 and applicable from assessment year 18-19. Why this amendment was brought in? Because if the trust who is receiving the donation, for that trust it is a corpus donation, so it will not be taxed as income. And if I give donation or if my trust give donation, then before this amendment this was treated as application of income. So there was no any point where tax would be levied. That's why from assessment year 18-19 it has been amended that corpus donation given to any other trust, then it will not be treated as application of income. If you give general donation, then it is perfectly fine and you can enjoy the exemption. It will be treated as application of income. But if you give corpus donation to other trust, then it will not be treated as application of income.
Umang, here you have to clarify that the Dhoni Trust is a 12A registered trust. If the trust is not registered under 12A, donation given by one trust to another trust, then this provision will not apply.
Yes, sir. If recipient trust is not registered, then
Trust under 12A. If the recipient trust is even registered under 1023C, then also this provision will not apply.
because in 1023C this will be taxable. Am I right, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Now, anonymous donation. What are the anonymous donation? The section 115 BBC subsection 3 gives the meaning that what is the anonymous donation. It has been defined as follow. It is a voluntary contribution referred in 224 2A, that is the definition of income, and the person receiving such contribution does not maintain a record of the identity indicating the name and address of person making such donation and such other record as may be prescribed, that are address and PAN of the donor. Now in this case, if donor is giving his identity but the trust is not maintaining the identity, then it will be treated as an anonymous donation and will be taxed accordingly. Now there are several exceptions which are required to be noted. Anonymous donation received by the trust which is wholly set up for religious purpose. Now in this case, this provision will not be applied and it will be treated as general donation only. Another one is trust set up for religious as well as charitable purpose. Partly religious, partly charitable. But not being the cases where donation are received by the medical or educational institution run by such trust. So let's summarize this. We can divide a situation in three cases and the according tax treatment. Case 1, when the donation is received by wholly religious purpose trust, then in that case section 115 BBC is not applicable. Donation is received by partly religious and partly charitable entity, then in this case anonymous donation made to an educational or a medical institution run by such entity, such anonymous donation is taxable at the rate of 30% plus surcharge plus cess if applicable. Any other anonymous donation is not subject to tax. Say for example, your objects, the trust, recipient trust objects are apart from the education and medical institution. The trust is not running any educational or medical institution and the trust is receiving the anonymous donation and the purpose of the such trust are partly religious and partly charitable, then in that case it will not be taxable. But if it is received by only charitable entities, then it will be taxed accordingly under 115 BBC. Now let's discuss the taxation of anonymous donation. What is the tax treatment? What is the tax rate? The tax rate is straight away 30% plus surcharge if applicable and plus health and education cess. What is the taxable amount of anonymous donation? Now here there is some calculation to classify what is the taxable amount of anonymous donation. First of all, we have to take amount of anonymous donation received by trust, and from that some amount will be deducted. What is the sum amount we are discussing? Now the remaining from actual anonymous donation less some amount, it is taxable as 30%. Remaining amount is treated as normal donation, general donation, and from that 15% will be eligible. Here, what is that sum amount? It is the 5% of total donation received by the trust, or 1 lakh rupees, whichever is higher. And here total donation will includes anonymous donation also. To understand this very clearly, let's discuss one practical example. Say for example, ABC Trust is having only charitable objectives, means anonymous donation will be taxable, and it has received a total donation of 50 lakh rupees. Out of these 50 lakhs, anonymous donation was rupees 10 lakh. Then let's count that what will be the taxable anonymous donation. It will be the 10 lakh, that is the total amount of anonymous donation received, and from that higher of 1 lakh or 5% of 50 lakh, that is 2,50,000 will be deducted. So 10 lakh out of higher from this, that is 2,50,000. So 7,50,000 will be taxable as anonymous donation, and 2,50,000, that is this amount, will be taxed as general donation. I hope it is clear. Now another kind of income that trust earns is the income from property held under the trust. Before we claim the benefit of section 11 subsection 1, that is benefit of 85% 15%, the property must be held under the trust. In case of a trust in relation to immovable property, the instrument of property should be duly registered in the name of trust. If merely the income and not the property out of which income is arising is held under a charitable or religious trust, then no exemption shall be allowed under section 11(1) in respect of such income. Say for example, a trustee is owning a residential building or some building, we can say, and from that trust is earning rental income. The income from rent is going to trust and not to the trustee. Then in that case, from that rental income, benefit of section 11 is not available, because it is the prima facie requirement to claim the benefit of section 11(1) that property must be held under the trust, under the name of trust. Income from property held under the trust are also taxable, but benefit of 85% is available. Now, what is the benefit?
Umang,
Yes, sir.
yeah, because what you are saying is it is subject to section 60 to 63 clubbing provision. If the proper income is transferred without transferring the property, the income earned from that property goes to the transferor and not to the transferee. So it is taxable in the hands of transferor and not in the hands of the trust.
Okay, sir. Now let's discuss the various exemptions that are under section 11. Firstly, we can categorize exemption in two categories. First is exemption under section 11 subsection 1, and another is section 11 subsection 2. In 11(1), corpus donation covered, 15% of gross income is covered, and income applied out of remaining 85%, that is after this 15%. And another one is section 11(2) exemption, that is the accumulation or set apart for specific purpose for specific time. Let's discuss one by one. Now, first of all, it is corpus donation, which we have already discussed that it is straight away exempted under section 11(1)(d), and it will not be taxable if trust is registered. Another is 15% of gross income that we were seeing from last 2-3 slides, that benefit of 85%. It means maximum 15% of income earned by the trust, that is income from property held under the trust and general donation. Here it is pertinent to note that general donation is covered, not corpus donation, because corpus is straight away exempt. Then why they allow additional 15%? So 15% of gross income will be exempted. That is the maximum amount. It is not a straight away exemption that we claimed in house property that flat 30% of rental income will be exempt. Now for computation of 15%, gross income will be taken, not a income after deducting the expenditure made by the trust. And this view has been held by the Supreme Court in the CIT versus Program for Community Organization in 2001 to 48 ITR. And as we have discussed that 15% of corpus donation is not available. And out of remaining 85, that is apart from that 15%, what is exempt? That income applied to the expenditure, income applied for charitable or religious purpose is also exempt. That is like capital expenditure, revenue expenditure, general donation to other trust. If asset purchase is claimed as capital expenditure, then depreciation is not allowed under 11(6). So this is the illustration of expenditure which are allowable. Further, the provisions of TDS, disallowance of cash payment in excess of 10,000 are also applicable to the trust, and trust is also required to make TDS, all the provision of TDS and this 48(3) cash expenditure in excess of 10,000 is also applicable to the trust. So let's discuss the example to clarify the provision. Say for example, ABC Trust is a registered trust and it has received rupees 10 lakh as corpus donation and also received rupees 15 lakhs as general donation and earned rupees 2,50,000 as an interest income. And out of this whole income, it has utilized rupees 5 lakh for object of the trust. Whatever the object may be, it is charitable purpose. Now, what will be the taxable income of ABC Trust? It would be as under. See, first of all, corpus donation, it would be straight away exempt as we have discussed under section 11(1)(d). General donation is taxable, that is 15 lakh plus interest income that is earned 2,50,000. So total income would be 17,50,000 gross total income. From this, expenses which are incurred for the object of trust would be deducted, that are of 5 lakhs. Now here 15% of gross income, that is 15 lakh plus 2,50,000, that is arriving at 262,500 would be exempt. But if here the object expenses which are incurred for the object of the trust are 18 lakh, say for example, then again 15% will not be available, because if you see the wording of the act, it says that if the trust is not able to utilize 85%, then 15% is available as deduction. So the taxable income would be 9,87,500, 17,50,000 less 5 lakhs less 15%. But here from this taxable income, the accumulation under section 11(2) can be made. What is the accumulation we are discussing? There is an exemption under section 11(2), that is accumulation or set apart. If income is accumulated for specific purpose for specific period, that is maximum 5 years, and is invested in specific modes, if these three conditions are fulfilled, then income for that particular previous year, it would be exempt, whatever the amount that is accumulated or set aparted. Let's discuss in detail. Where trust is not able to spend 85% of its income, then in such situation, trust can accumulate or set apart such amount. Such set apart will not be included in net total income of the trust in that previous year if following other two conditions are satisfied. That trust has furnished Form 10, that is statement to AO stating the specific purpose and specific period of set apart on or before due date of filing of return. Such accumulation should be for specific purpose, that is, say for example, to construct a building for the trust property, to acquire some property, to utilize that particular amount to treat if the trust is running an hospital. Now this amount will only be used for treating the patients of cancer only, like that. Such accumulated money should be invested in modes prescribed under section 11.5. It is the long list that we are not discussing, but these, in short, we can say that these are the safe investment, like fixed deposit in scheduled bank. Such accumulated money should not be donated to other trust. Now it is the very important point. Out of accumulation, trust can make donation, but it will not be, if the trust make donation, then it will lose exemption under section 11.2. Now these are the situation in which exemption under section 11.2 will be withdrawn or denied. Income which has been accumulated as per section 11.2, if is applied for purposes other than for which it was accumulated. Say for example, the amount was accumulated to construct a building, but trust expend it for its regular activity, for day-to-day expenses, then in that case this exemption will be withdrawn. If the accumulation is not applied within the specific time for which it has been made, say for example in our case it is 5 years, then if this amount is not utilized in 5 years or in the next year after specific period, that is the 6th year, then in such case it will be taxable as deemed income in the 6th year, not in the 5th year, but it will be taxable as deemed income in the 6th year. So here trust is earning one bonus year for expending that amount. Or where trust is ceases to remain this accumulation amount is ceases to remain invested in modes prescribed under 11.5 that are safe investment, then in that case also this exemption under section 11.2 will be withdrawn or denied. As we have discussed that if the trust donates out of this accumulation, then in that case also the exemption will be denied. And one another case, exemption shall be denied if form 10, that is statement to AO or return of income is late filed. Here if return of income is late filed, then any exemption under section 11 and 12 shall not be available. This came from assessment year 18-19. Now there are several other remedies if 85% could not be applied apart from the accumulation. So what trust can do apart from accumulation, but it is advisable to take benefit of 11.2, but following are some other remedies which can also be helpful for the trust. When 85% could not be applied because whole or any part of the income has not been received in previous year. If say for example trust receives huge amount of donation in the month of March and then trust is not able to utilize the same, then it can take this view or it can take this path. In such case, if trust file declaration to AO, that is in form 9A, that such income will be applied in the year of receipt or in the next year of receipt, then it will be deemed application for current year. And if this amount is not applied in the year of receipt or in the next year of receipt, then it will be taxed in the next year of receipt. Say for example, for assessment year 19-20, someone has committed that he will make donation of 10 lakh rupees, but it has not yet been received and trust has booked income. So in that case, trust can file declaration to AO that this amount of donation will be utilized in the year of receipt or in the next year of receipt. Now say for example, this donation is received in the assessment year 2021, then trust have to utilize it in the year assessment 2021 or 21-22. But if yet in 21-22 trust is not able to utilize it, it will be taxable in 21-22. But this is the very rare situation because most of the trust follow the case basis of accounting and no one booked the income on the basis of someone's commitment. Another one is where 85% could not be applied for any other reason. In such case, if trust file declaration to AO that such income will be applied in the next year, then it will be deemed application for current year. And if that amount which are specified in the declaration is not applied in next year, then it will be taxed in the next year. This is simple. This will happen in the case where we have discussed that where trust received donation in the month of March. In both these above cases, Form 9A is to be filed on or before the due date of return of income. So in my point of view, option of 11.2 is more safe option if the object is specific, that for which reason the trust is required to use that amount. Now section 12A says in which cases section 11 and 12, it describes condition for applicability of section 11 and 12. Exemption under section 11 and 12 will be available only if following conditions are satisfied. First of all, trust should be registered under section 12AA, now 12AB. Exemption will be available in previous year in which application is made. Application for registration is made. Another one is if total income, that is before claiming exemption and under section 11 and 12 is more than basic exemption limit, then audit report in form 10B should be furnished before filing of return. Here it is pertinent to note that form 10B should be filed before filing return of income. In the act it has been said that it should be filed on or before filing of return of income, but practically if we see, we cannot simultaneously file form 10B and return of income. Therefore, it is before filing return of income. And I have seen the cases where 10B is filed even only 10 minutes later. Then only trust will not able to enjoy exemption under section 11 and 12. It is processed by CPC that 10B is filed late. Therefore, exemption under section 11 and 12 are not available. And the income here which we are required to here note that is before claiming exemption under section 11 and 12, that is the gross income before deducting expenditure or corpus donation. So this gross income is more than basic exemption limit, then audit report is must, and that too before filing return of income. Now section 12AA, registration. This section will be applicable up to 31st March 21. It will be applicable up to 31st March 21 if no further extension is available. Section 12AA deals with registration of trust. As we have discussed, this is effective up to 31st March 21. From 1st April 21, new section 12AB will become operative. To register trust or institution under section 12AA, application to CIT exemption is to be made in form 10A through online mode. It is purely electrical mode now. On receipt of application, CIT exemption will satisfy himself regarding genuineness of the activity of the trust and compliance of such requirement of any other law for the time being in force by the trust as which are material for the purpose of achieving object of the trust. Not every provision of every law are required to be complied with, but the provisions of the law which are material for the purpose of achieving object of the trust are required to be complied with. And commissioner may pass order in writing for the registration or refusal of registration. It is continue. Time limit for passing an order or approval or refusal is 6 months from the end of the month in which application is made. Otherwise, it is treated as deemed to be registered. It has been confirmed by the Supreme Court in 2016 that if within 6 months no action is taken by CIT, then it is deemed to be registered. But here one practical question is that what will be the registration number? Because you will not be get any kind of certificate. Therefore, it is the provision of act, but practical situation is what will be the registration number, what will be the where will be the registration certificate. Anyway, in case of modification of object of the trust which are not conforming with the condition of registration certificate, then trust has to make application for fresh registration within 30 days from such modification. That is come from assessment year 78. After granting of registration, if the CIT is satisfied that activity of the trust are not genuine, activities are not in accordance with objects, or trust has not complied with the requirement of any other law which are material for the purpose of achieving object of the trust, he may cancel such registration under section 12AA. So not all three are required to be fulfilled. If any one of these three is attracted, then registration may be cancelled under section 13 subsection 8. Now section 13(1), it deals with what are the cases in which section 11 and 12 shall not be applied. So 13(1) says that benefit of section 11 and 12 shall not be available in following cases. If income is earned by the private trust, income is for the benefit of particular religious caste or community, that is also part of private trust. If income is earned for the benefit of specified person, relative, it has been defined here under. And if funds of the trust are not invested in modes prescribed under section 11(5), that is the safe investments, if any of the four of the above happens, then in that case provisions of section 11 and 12 shall not be applied. And when 13(1) is applied, income of the trust will be taxable at maximum marginal rate. Now what are the specified person? Who are the relatives of the trust? The first is author or founder. Another is person who has made substantial amount of donation, that is more than 50,000 rupees. Where founder or donor is HUF, then member of the such HUF will be the relative. The trustee or manager of that trust will also be considered as relative of the trust for the purpose of 13(1). Now let's discuss some practical issues. Whether charitable trusts are allowed to carry forward their losses or deficit of earlier years for set off against their income of subsequent years. The Supreme Court in the case of CIT exemption versus Subros Education Society held that excess expenditure of earlier year would be allowed to set off against the income of subsequent years. But if anyone has filed ITR 7, then they can know that if your expenditure are in excess of income, then while processing at CPC, there will be a error, or they will issue a proposed adjustment notice intimation under 143(1)(a) regarding you cannot claim expenditure in excess of your total income. But there is a judgment that trust can carry forward their losses and set off it against the future income or income of subsequent years. But practically right now it is not applicable, or it is not possible. Another one is whether investment in fixed deposit would be regarded as utilization for acquisition of new capital asset. Say for example, there is a capital gain to trust, and trust invests the net consideration into fixed deposit for the 6 months or more. Then also it would be regarded as utilization of net consideration for acquisition of new capital asset. So for the purpose of 11(1)(a), fixed deposit are also considered as capital asset, and it has been clarified by CBDT by its instruction number 883 dated 24th September 1975 that investment in FD for 6 months or above would be regarded as utilization of net consideration. Whether depreciation and cost of capital asset purchased can be claimed simultaneously as utilization of income. No, the same has been restricted by insertion of section 11(6) by the Finance Act 2014, that therefore no depreciation is allowed if cost of new asset purchased is claimed as utilization of income and vice versa. Now let's discuss recent important amendments which are affecting to trust. So what is the basic idea? Presently, a charitable trust or an institution which are registered for several decades under section 12A or 12AA of the Act are not required to renew the registration. Once it is granted, it is the permanent, or it is for the perpetual period, unless it is withdrawn or cancelled under section 12AA3 or 12AA4. Similarly, all ATG certificates expiring after 1st October 2009 shall remain valid in perpetuity unless specifically cancelled or revoked. Prior to an amendment by Finance Act 2009, ATG certificates were required to be renewed after the validity period. But as of now, it is for perpetuity. Once you received, it is for perpetuity. It has now been proposed in the Finance Bill 2020 that the provisions of Section 12AA shall not be applicable on or after 1st April 2021. So when the finance bill was introduced, this cutoff date was 1st of June 2020. Then it has been extended to the 1st October 2020. Now in last week recently, it has been extended to the 1st April 2021. That from 1st April 2021, 12AA shall become inoperative. So in Finance Bill, they have inserted a clause in section 12A1. New clause AC has been inserted in section 12A1 from 1st April 21 to provide that where the trust is registered under section 12A or under section 12AA, it shall be required to make an application in the prescribed form to the principal commissioner or commissioner for registration of trust within 3 months from 1st April 2021, and such trust should obtain registration under section 12AB. Now this is very much difficult. This would be very much difficult because every single trust has to apply for re-registration within the 3 months, and if trust is not re-registering within a specified time, that is 3 months starting from 1st April 21, then it will lose their exemption. So if all the trust applies, then in this way all existing trust will be registered under section 12AB. As we have discussed, this amendment will require every trust which are already registered to apply again, and in case of such application is not made, then by implication the registration shall stand cancelled on the expiry of 3 months, that is 30th June 2021, with the consequences that such trust shall not be eligible for claiming exemption under section 11. It is further provided that a trust or an institution applying for re-registration can avail the exemption under section 11 and under section 12 from the assessment year from which registration was earlier granted to that trust. It means that the exemption will continue and there will be no break in the exemption that the trust is enjoying. So it is the welcome provision. So the amendments which are brought in are pertaining to registration only. Let's take a synopsis of various categories of registration under new provisions. First category is existing trust applying for re-registration. Another is provisional registration, that is applicable to the newly established trust. Another is trust having provisional registration and applying for re-registration. And fourth one is trust whose registered under the new provision are expiring. So let's discuss one by one. Existing trust applying for re-registration. Here every registered trust under section 12AA has to apply for re-registration. So what is when application to be made for registration? So application for registration is to be made within 3 months from the commencement of new provision, that is till 30th June 21. What is the time limit to grant registration by IT authority? It is also 3 months from the end of the month in which application is made. Say for example, application is made on 22nd May 21. Then 3 months from the end of the month, that is from 31st May, there 3 months will be counted. So by 31st August, trust will get registration. And what will be the validity of registration granted? Such registration shall be valid for the period of 5 years. Second category is trust applying for registration for the first time under new provision, that is generally newly incorporated trust. every trust applying for the registration for the very first time, may it be newly incorporated trust or old trust, which is not yet registered, shall be granted provisional registration. Now, when the application for the provisional registration should be made, trust can apply for the registration at its own discretion. When it want to take registration, it will apply. Now, what is the time limit to grant the registration from IT authority? The IT authority shall grant registration within 1 month from the end of the month in which application is made. And what will be the validity? It will be valid for the period of 3 years. The idea behind this provisional registration is that the trust can get registered immediately after its incorporation and can start its activity, and there is the seamless experience to the trust that it should not have to wait for the registration. So if the trust is not registered and newly incorporated, if it receives any kind of income, it will be taxed at 30%, and it is the hardship to the trust. But now with this provision, trust can apply for the provisional registration. This is the welcome step by the department. Any application made under registration under earlier section of 12AA and it is pending as on 1st April 2021, that is the newly said cutoff date, then it will be treated as application under section 12AB and the provisional registration shall be granted. Now the third category is trust which has already obtained the provisional registration under new provision and applying for the final registration. Now when this application for the final registration is to be made, it is to be made within 6 months from the commencement of activities by the trust or 6 months prior to the expiry of provisional registration. That if the trust has been granted registration from 1st April 21, 1st April 22, then it is valid for 31st March 25. Then it has to be applied, it has to be make application for final registration at least 6 months prior to the expiry. Now what will be the time limit to grant registration by the IT authority? IT authority will grant registration within 6 months from the end of the month in which application is made. And what is the validity of the registration granted? It is valid for the period of 5 years. And the fourth, trust is having registration under section 12AB, that is under new provision, and 5 years are expiring. In this case, application is to be made at least 6 months prior to the expiry of registration. The time limit to grant the registration is within 6 months from the end of month in which application is made, and the validity of the such registration is for the period of 5 years. This similar time limits as discussed in categories A, B, C, D shall also applicable to the trust registered under section 80G. So that's all from my side. Now if anyone is having question and answer, or Atul sir, any remarks or any comments?
If there is some question, please take some. There are few questions. 2 questions are there.
Yes, sir. Yes.
What is the reason available in recourse available in case of registration has not been granted within 6 months to enjoy the benefit of exemptions, as registration number is not available, though after 6 months it will be deemed registered? The answer will be the recourse is only to file a writ petition in the court. There is no other possibility to get the registration number.
Yes, it is the issue, prevailing issue, because it is the provision, but practically it is not effective.
And the second question is from Kiru Paret. Please provide the brief regarding the section 161, 3 or 4 for determining the tax rate of a trust. If the trust is not is available registration, or the section 11, 12 exemption is not granted or is not available, it will be taxed as an AOP, and it will be taxed at maximum marginal rate, that is 30% plus surcharge.
Atul sir, I have also one question.
Yes.
If the trust is unregistered trust, but it is the public trust, then in that case, which ITR is required to be filed?
Form number 5.
But sir, while we file form number 5 in electronically, there is the one error that the name pen of the authorizing person is required to be available in partner/members detail. Now, in case of public trust, there will be no specific members, right, sir?
Yeah. But there is no, if the trust is public trust and 1112 is not granted or is not available, then you have to file because you have a registration number, but you are denying because of the some conditions 1112 is not applicable. Then also you have to file form number 7 and not any other form.
But trust is not registered at all. Trust
It is
is,
an AOP. It is an AOP.
but ITR 5 is also not filing. There is the error that in case of public trust, there will be no member, sir.
Then, but it will be tax and AOP, and for AOP there is a form number 5.
But
There is a problem. There is a problem. We have to get the way out. Put XYZ.
yes, yes, sir.
That is a practical issue.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions are invited, or you can also email me. I will share PPT in which there is the email ID.
I have to add one thing.
Yes.
For there is this new provision is also applicable to section 1023C trust.
Yes.
1023C trust also is required to get re-registration within 3 months from 1st April 21. And second is, up till now, the trust can avail the benefit of either 1023C or 1112. Now they have made a specific provision. If the trust has opted for exemption under 1023C, then 1112 will not be applicable. And if the trust has opted for 1112, then 1023C will not be applicable.
So only one can be claimed.
Only one registration can be available.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Umang. How was your session, Umang?
It was the first experience for me, but it was the very nice. It
Was really great, Umang.
I was interrupted. There was the remarks by Atul sir. It was great.
I also request you, Atul sir, to please guide us more on this topic, to say few more lines from your side, to enlighten us with your words also, sir. It would be really grateful for us.
There are certain points which requires the point that I want to make is for accumulation of income in excess of 15%, if the trust does not spend in the 6th year, it is taxable, and you will not get. It will not be allowed to re-accumulate. It is 100% taxable.
This was the jugglery which trust were doing earlier.
Now it is not possible. Now the trust will be facing the consequences of tax.
Yes.
And secondly, if the trust is not in position to spend that fund, he can apply to the ITO to change the object of the object of the spending or extend it. But you have to apply to the ITO.
Yes.
The provision of section 40A, 1A and 43B is also applicable. So if the trust do not make TDS, the whole expenditure will not be allowed as an application of income. And if the expenditure is paid in excess of 10,000, then though in the 43, it is 30%, but in the case of trust, whole amount will not be allowed as an expenditure. You have not touched upon the capital gain provisions applicable to trust because might be a time constraint, but capital gain is not applicable. For section 45 to 48 is not applicable to trust. There is a specific provision in section 11, and it will be taxed if the trust gets the capital gain, earns the capital gain, and if it invests the all net consideration into another fixed assets, then no capital gain is leviable. If the portion of the capital net consideration is applied or invested, then proportionate capital gain will be exempt.
Yes, sir.
This is the brief capital gain provisions.
Yes.
And if the section 11-12 is not applicable, then it will be treated as an AOP. If the trust has rent income, it will be taxed under income from house property. 1/5 deduction will be available. All other income will go into IFOS.
Yes.
But there is a provision in 56. Any voluntary or corpus donation is not taxable under section 56. There is a specific exemption under section 56 that any donation received by a trust is exempt. So only the other income, that is interest income, is taxable under section 56.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you so much, Atul sir. We really are grateful to have you here. So basically, what I remember is while I was mugging up these sections during my IPCC, so really this mugging up this session and telling it through is interesting, but knowing the implication of these sections is really more interesting. So thank you so much, Umang Dakshini sir, and thank you so much, Atul Shah sir. I would now like to request Divya Jain, Managing Committee Member of Vikasa, to present a vote of thanks. Yes, Divya, over to you now.
Yes, it was really a great session. I deem it a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all who helped us in making this session such a resounding success. First of all, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to our mentor, CA Atul Shah sir, for gracing today's Swadhyay session. Thank you so much, sir, for guiding us and thought-provoking address. I would also like to mention that sir generally don't go for the session, but he consented us on our requests. So thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable time. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Mr. Umang Dakshini sir, for making excellent presentation and this session interesting and meaningful. I would like to express our profound gratitude to CA Fenil Shah sir, CA Anjali ma'am for marking their presence in this session and for giving valuable insights. I would also like to thank the Vikasa team and all the people who have attended by overwhelmingly and making the session fruitful. Once again, I thank you all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shall I leave?
Divya, you can now end the meeting. And before you end the meeting, so our next session will be announced soon. I request all of you to spread it, right, to get more audience, right? So speaking, just it would really boost up the speakers' enthusiasm and it's like energy, right? So it would be really great. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much. So let's end the session. Thank you.